Let me talk about one more important element of shame. What if, Yats, I did something in my past, or I participated in my past, or I was a part of something in my past that I look back and I feel ashamed of. So I don't approve of it. I feel ashamed of. Now that's a huge part of what actually builds and grows into the shame that we're still carrying today. At the start, maybe the first thing we feel is a sense of guilt. Guilt is meant to be a corrective action by the subconscious mind to say, okay, I woke up late today. I want to have a bit different life. So tomorrow I'm going to change it. I'm going to try and live better tomorrow. So it's meant to create corrective action only at that period of time. But what happens when guilt lives inside you continuously? Let's say even around your body, right? So you feel and you look and everybody criticizing and judging you around your body and the way it looks and how you feel about yourself, to this point now where you look at yourself and maybe your eating habits, your sleeping habits, or what you did. Let's say it was even an action. Let's say, I'll be honest, in my past, I have slept with people while I was in a relationship and I cheated on my partner. And that was such a terrible thing to do. It was a terrible thing to even do to myself and my own inner child. But let's say that this is something I hold a huge level of shame for, right? That I cheated on my partner, and now every time I go back there, I feel so much shame for that version of me who did what they did. Now, here's something that nobody really listens to or understands. Why is that version of me having and holding on to so much shame? Why do I feel like it's literally weighing down on me and limiting me and preventing me from feeling love? It's because at that period of time when I did what I did not have a safe space. I did not have an environment or an opportunity to actually be able to talk about it, to be able to understand why I did what I did. I didn't have a place to be understood. I didn't have a place to be related to. I didn't have a place to connect. I didn't have a place to let go. So instead, what I was received with was, before I even could understand why I did it, the first thing I was doing was, it was wrong. It was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. It's terrible. It's wrong. It's bad. Of course it's wrong. But judging it as just being terrible, wrong, and rejecting myself for having done that is just going to make me feel worse and worse about myself. So the first thing I need to do to work through it is I need to create a safe space for myself. I need to be able to listen, to hear myself, and understand why I did what I did. So for those of you who are holding on to some piece of shame out there, I just want you to take a moment of ownership for yourself. And just like me, I'm also going to throw in something here. I just want you to throw out, if you're holding on to a piece of shame out there, just say, yes, I want to let go. I'm just going to say this right here. Boom. I've thrown that in the chat. And if you're holding on to a piece of shame or something that's limiting you, that you judge yourself for in the past, or that you still hold on to about the way you look, the way you feel, the choices you make, or anything, I want you to throw it in the chat as well, just like me, and say, yes, I want to let go. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this is because if you take the empowerment of saying to yourself that, yes, I want to let go of this, or yes, I want to be free, I want to live free, I want to live with freedom and self-acceptance and love, you're taking the empowerment to say, okay, now I'm willing to step into the place that says, what do I do next? What do I do to let go of it? So I want to hear from you guys in the chat. Yes, beautiful. I see people saying, yes, I want to let go. Take this moment of empowerment just for yourself. It's not for anybody else but you. It is literally just for you. Okay, I see people saying, yes, I want to let go. Yes, I want to let go. Yes, I want to let go. Fuck yes, I want to let go. If you want to let go of the shame, you have to do something really, really important. Listen to me carefully. You have to first look back at the version of you that first started to feel the shame. So whether it was about your body, think of the first times when you first started to internalize, everybody else commenting about your body. If it was an action, like I said for myself, when I had cheated on my partner and slept with other women, I had to go back there and see who I was. But here's what you have to do. You have to go back to see that version of who they are, and you have to do something you have never done for yourself. Can anybody tell me what that is? What is it that you have to do for yourself? You have to do for yourself something that you have never done, something you've never given yourself. I want you to throw in the chat. I want to hear if there are any guesses. You have to go back to a past version of you, and you have to give them something you've never given. You have to offer that past version of you something they've never had before. And that's why they felt the shame. What is that? I want people to throw it in the chat. I want you to take some guesses. I want to see how smart you guys are, how emotionally aware you are, how emotionally intelligent you are, and what you may be thinking of. So throw it in the chat. I want to see, what do you think that past version of you needs? Good. I see compassion. What are some other options out there? Self-compassion, good. Go out. What else is there? What else is there? Keep going. Forgiveness. Good. Gopi, one of my childhood friends from like back home. So happy to see her on here. Love, of course. What else? Love is like encompassing all of it. Acceptance, compassion. Good. You guys are literally on that line. You guys are giving me all the right answers. Compassion, grace, forgiveness. Yes, beautiful. Okay. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. You guys are all right because it provides the same things. You're providing different steps of it. The first thing you really need to give yourself is understanding without any fucking judgment. You need to really listen to the version of you who did what they did, processed what they did, or had what they did at that period of time. So even if it was an action that you really took, that today you look back and you're like, you're so disappointed with, first go back to that version of you who created or did that action. I processed the shame after like I said, after cheating on my partner for so many years. I lived with 3 years at least of like that such heavy shame that it destroyed all my relationships. You know how it destroyed my relationships? After my friends started to find out that this is what I did, to my partner, they were all like, man, we thought you were a totally different guy. And so a lot of them started breaking away from me. So now what's the first thing you do when you feel that level of threat or like rejection or abandonment? You want to overcompensate. And so I try to reach back out to try and like make my friends better, like even try to buy something sometimes, all of that stuff that tried to improve my friendships. And yet it kept like failing and falling. My friendships just didn't work out. So I lived with this heavy shame that what I did in a relationship literally destroyed like 60% of the relationships in my life. And I lived with that shame for years, being like, do I even deserve love? Is my life going to fucking work out? Am I ever going to be free of this thing? Am I ever going to feel happy or peaceful or just like in love? And I realized that on every single time that I was looking back and judging that past version of me, I was adding more shame to this bag. So one time I said, you know what? Let me first try and figure out who it was who first did the action that they did or stepped into that thing. And when I went back there, I realized that that version of me was not the best version of me by far. That version of me was so wounded, was so insecure, had their own core wounds from their childhood and stuff flying to the surface and hitting me heavy, that I needed this sense of like external validation so much that if I didn't get it from my partners, the first thing I would do is I would seek it out from the outside world. So when my partners were traveling and I didn't have that sense of validation for myself, that sense of safety, I would go out and I'd find some other woman or I'd find somebody else to like try and get it from. And that's what would fuel my like weakened sense of validation. So when I look back at who I was at that time, I'm like, of course I fucking did what I did, because I was hurting so hard deep down inside. I had no sense of like self-love. I had no sense of like supporting self-value and worth, that I so desperately like clung on to it from like the women and the people around me, even the friendships around me, which is why I was so afraid when they all started to end. So then I started to say first, after I started to understand who I was, what you really need, the first step is understanding. The second step is compassion, just as so many of you put it in there. One of the biggest things that encourages shame is further judgment. And judgment and compassion cannot exist together. Does anybody think that judgment and compassion can exist together? I want to see if you guys can see, like if you guys believe it can. You cannot have judgment where you're judging and shaming and criticizing yourself, and compassion where you're understanding, you're letting go, you're maybe even forgiving yourself. You can't have both of those things together. They're very conflicting. So when you start to give the past version of you compassion, you start to see them for who they were, why they did what they did, why they couldn't step into a certain thing, why they believed what they did of themselves. And then you start to do the next step after that, which is you start to accept. You start to accept like that you're holding on to so many things. You start to accept that it's limited you. You start to accept that it's brought you to you. But the biggest thing you need to do after that to release it with that compassion is you need to now stop judging it again and again and again. And that can only happen when you create a completely non-judgmental space for your own self in your life. When you create a space which is so full of love, which is so full of just like acceptance, which is so full of just kindness to yourself, even for all the things you've done, even for all the things that you've like done in the past, even the things that you've not done, even the ways you wish you had showed up but you hadn't. You have to now learn to accept, be compassionate on that version. But it's very hard to also be compassionate with that version of yourself if you don't understand why they did what they did. So what we tend to do with shame is we'll tend to look back and we'll also hold that version of ourselves to a standard of who we are today. We'll sit here today and be like, you shouldn't have fucking done that. I shouldn't have done that. That's terrible. How can I do that? How can I live with it? Even if it's a minute after. Even if it's a minute after we've performed that action, we'll still go back and we'll be like, oh my God, I hate you for having done that. How could you have done that? Because in that moment, there were things in our mind. In that moment, our heart was closed off. In that moment, our subconscious fears were fucking flying through the bat. In that moment, the fear of rejection was so big. In that moment, the anxiety of not being with someone was consuming us. And that's why we acted the way we acted in that moment. So to heal and learn to let go of that shame, we have to learn to show up for that past version of ourselves. You cannot love who you are today until you learn to love and accept the past versions of you. Throw that in the fucking chat if you agree with it. I want to say this again. You cannot learn to fully love who you are today if you cannot learn to fully love and accept the past versions of you. Everything they've done, everything they've chosen, every way they've showed up. Even if those things seem difficult and scary and bad and challenging, when you start to see them as just having been someone who was also a product of their environment, then you start to forgive them for some of the actions they took, because you're like, of course you didn't know any different. You were basically brainwashed in this conditioning atmosphere to think that, okay, I am like this, I am a Christian, I am a Hindu, I am a boy, or I am this, or like I am fat or whatever. So obviously I'm going to act in those directions and keep fearing and imploding on that. So if you learn to now see that past version of you, you learn to accept that past version of you, you learn to let go of judgment of them. Because another thing about the past, which is so fucking crazy, if we believe we live in this linear time world, is that you can't change it. You can't do anything to change your past. So what can you do? You might as well learn to release it, right? You might as well learn to change the way you feel about it. So if you've done that action, you stepped into it, you have to go revisit it, and you have to learn to change the way you see the person who did that. Today, all of you are watching this and all of you are so fucking emotionally aware that I can promise you 2 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you weren't that. I wasn't that fucking yesterday. So how can I hold my yesterday self to a standard I wish they could have been today? How can I do that? It's impossible. That's so unfair, right? And here's what's so fucking crazy of shame, or so crazy about those expectations. If I still hold my yesterday self to those standards that like I basically think I should live off today, I'll do the same thing to my partners. I'll expect my partners to act better than they should have acted instead of understanding why they have acted that way. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.